And welcome, friends. Great to have you with us, and thanks for joining us once again. Stephen Fetter here. I manage the United Learning Program for the General Counsel Office, and I am, I guess, the host of this program, which is kind of it's wonderful to be able to connect with you this way across the miles and across the time zones, and realize what a complicated organization we're all part of and what a vital role each of you play in the midst of that. So one more time for the spring, and this will be our last session for spring 2023. We're not going to meet at the end of June, but one more time for this season of the year, we'll turn things over to Eric to kick us off. Eric,
okay, great. Thank you, Steve, and good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are. You folks, many of you know the drill. I always have the creed up here to remind us that what we're doing here is church, and I dare say ministry, because it helps make everything else possible. What I call the business side of church. And as we start, I'd also like to just take a moment to honor the land. I've been reading different land acknowledgements, short and long, and this is a shorter one for those. Everyone knows the General Counsel Office is in Toronto, and Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. And the Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And may we all find this spirit in our own actions each day. So with that, what are we going to cover tonight? Well, there always seems to be something new, and I think Bob mentioned one of them already, so he's stealing a bit of my thunder, but that's okay. We'll talk about some new forms, some CRA programs, and then a bunch of mainly reminders, a few new bits, both on the insurance program and others. But there are a number of things you should do for mid-year and be aware of for mid-year. So that's the focus. Towards the end of each year, we hey, what do you have to do to wrap up the year? Or what do you have to do to prepare for the next year? So what do we need to do here in the middle? So first of all, there is an updated T3010, and it specifically deals with a change in legislation that potentially allows some granting to non-qualified donees. So the form is online now, and ironically, if you haven't filed already, and this crew, everyone should have, but you do know that it's a June 30th deadline. If you haven't filed, my read of the charity's website is that this is the form you need to use. And if you have filed, then you can ignore what I just said. So anyway, this news came out on the 15th. The form used to be revised virtually every year, so this isn't a big deal. There isn't other new stuff on there. And for the most part, trying to jump the hoops to be a qualifying disbursement to a non-qualified donee, for most of you, it's not worth the effort. So we haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. So here's what it says on the website. It says you must use the updated version of the form. Okay. If you already filed for your fiscal, then you do not need to refile. So anyway, what I just said, basically, if you're slow filing, I suspect that this is the form that will be provided to you online or otherwise. And the CRA goes on to, again, promote the My Business account. And, I hope, learned our lesson around how much less work it is for a treasurer once you get that set up. It's to be able to even change something or go in and look really quickly. It's a very powerful tool. Okay, also from the CRA, they had some webinars that they postponed for some reason earlier in the spring. So they have a webinar on books and records, and that might be of interest to you. There's 3 English versions and a French version in early June. There's the information. You could just go to the CRA Charities Directorate and they'll point you in that direction. But we do provide most of that information either we have in webinars, but also in the financial handbook for treasurers. Okay, moving on to, again, more CRA, and this is more on the, not so much the Charities Directorate, but the taxman. Any of you with the famous CEBA loans, if I remember what that acronym stood for after all that time, I believe it was the Canadian Emergency Business Account. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Quite a number of you, about 25 million in total, have CEBA loans of either $40,000 or $60,000 arising from the pandemic, and those are interest-free as long as you pay off the due portion this year. And so I'm sure most of you have this on your radar. If you have a $40,000 loan and you pay off $30,000, the $10,000 is a grant. If you have a $60,000 loan and you pay off $40,000, $20,000 is a grant. And if we want to complicate it further, Clyde will have explained the accounting many times over a couple of years ago, where supposedly you've already counted that grant money in your financial statements. Whether you have or have not, one way or another, don't miss this. Like this is a grant, the one grant you'll ever have that you don't have to apply for in a big way. And here are the details from the government. So it's 0% until 2023, 5% after, and your bank or credit union will tell you what your interest rate timetable is. And you don't have to pay, you can go interest only for another 2 years till December 2025. That's the deal. But all of these loans have to be repaid. But this should not apply to any of you in the sense that pay off the loan. And here's, if you can't or you're struggling to do that, here's the solution that we're offering from the General Counsel Office. We have a loan program to support capital assistance for congregations. Swap it out. If you are in a situation where you can't make that loan payment, borrow from the national office to pay off that loan. Now, the interest rate's going to be the same. I don't want, the finance folks, we talked about our finance committee and so on. We don't want there to be almost like a moral hazard or an extra incentive. So the interest rate will be the same, but the difference is you will have gotten the grant portion, which you would otherwise have to pay back. And just for ease, and so an old person like me can remember, we're keeping the terms the same. So the idea would be interest only until 2025, at which point it's fully payable. But let me repeat again: if you have one of those, it's a financial mistake not to pay it off and swap it out. Okay, a few repeat slides just in case there's anyone new out there, and if there isn't, please bear with me as we do a few repeats. Every treasurer and every church, every community of faith should have an account on Church Hub. That is where you get your information on statistics, assessments, all kinds of other things. But if you're a treasurer and not signed up, please do. you could do that by sending an email to Susan Jackson. Okay, within that, just a reminder that all pastoral charges after a 5-year transition are assessed in a consistent manner, with those with greater revenues or investments paying more, and we like to think that it's a consistent and very transparent approach that's faithful to the church. A reminder too, if you haven't submitted your statistics yet, and again, this group probably has, but as soon as you do, you'll already know your 2024 assessment number for planning purposes, and all of that information is available online. Again, a couple of reminder slides, just because I'm trying to get all the reminders in one place. So you, as a unincorporated charity, you don't need to charge GST, HST, and you should be claiming that rebate. And Clyde, remind me, is it still you're able to claim twice a year, or have they forced us to once a year?
No, they're forcing you to twice a year.
Well, better still.
And it has to be on the anniversary of your year end, fiscal year end. Most of us, that's December 31, so it would be June 30th and December 31. But for those few that have a fiscal year end otherwise, it's accordingly.
Right. And just to say, for anyone who does have a fiscal year end that's different, and we used to help people make that change occasionally, because folks wanted to go July to June to align sort of with the church programming year, if you will. The CRA no longer allows that, to the extent that United Churches are an internal division. We all have to have the same fiscal year end. So if you're at Eglinton St. George's in Toronto, for example, who 10 years ago I helped them switch, they're grandfathered, but everyone else is going to need to live with the fiscal year end. Okay, again, there's just some information here on the onboarding. Just as a reminder, I'm not going to read it or speak to it. Again, I would expect that most folks on this call have already done this. A clarification, we've done a couple of specialty webinars that are available on ChurchX. The really key ones are GST, HST, how to complete the T3010, how to close in an orderly fashion and make sure that the CRA paperwork is done correctly. Those are all available on the ChurchX website, and Steve, I haven't searched them myself, but Stephen tells me they're easily searchable. And just to say, one of the things I didn't say there was that if there is a closure or amalgamation, full assessments are due for that year, and people should plan for that in their disbursement program that they look to have approved. Okay, again, from last time, Faithful Footprints. This is something you'll hear more and more about. It's the single most popular grant program in the church right now. We're hoping to do 500, have helped 500 churches by 2025. And although we haven't announced it yet, I'm hoping to do 1,000 by 2030. And this is to help our buildings be more sustainable and resilient. They're matching grants. And the great part of it is just the expert advice that's available through Faith in the Common Good, who we work with closely on this. One of my ambitions for the church is that every single church somewhere in some small way or big way have a story that they're proud enough that they want to see it in the United Church Sustainability Report, which is something that we print biannually. So there's lots of great stories in there that you can watch for. And I think some of you on this call are have gotten your name in print there before. Again, you're on ChurchX, so I don't need to talk. I've mentioned the available items, but those are the three things that you need to, in my opinion, have accounts for if you're going to be a church treasurer. ChurchX, is how we deliver information and education. Church Hub is where you pick up administrative stuff, including statistics, assessments, and if you're a minister, there's information there. It depends on your role. And we have security based on role. And what's the other one? My business account. I mentioned this one. I'll mention it again. The best resource that I'm aware of in the country, it comes out of tucc.ca. And Katja Britton has done has blogs and all kinds of information available. She's also offering a course that's going to be the equivalent of a full day seminar, but it in true fashion these days, it's something that you can do, as the expression goes, asynchronicity, where you can do it at your own time, but still have the opportunity to liaise with other participants. She's been signing people up here through the spring. I think they're planning to launch it full blast, like give people a chance to enroll over the summer and launch this in September. We'll also be looking at ways to make this easier to access, or maybe a larger one-time event type offering. We'll be exploring that over the summer as well. Buying United, again, a procurement service. We've moved this again. There's lots of stuff that we've tried to do as a church. We tried to do it on our own, maybe with paid staff, maybe with volunteers, but increasingly we're trying to do certain things in a more professional way. So we're working with Roundtable Procurement Services that works with literally hundreds and hundreds of charities. It might even be thousands across the country. Okay, so moving to a few HR reminders. This is one of the things that you need to do before you go away for the summer, if that's your plan. There are cost of living adjustments to be made. There's been ample communication on this, but it needs to be put in place for July 1. And I won't, as I say, there's been ample communication. This is really just a reminder.
Eric, I'd like to just comment. We have to have it in place before the first payroll in July.
Always good for you. You're the detail guy on that stuff. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, because if you do it before June, it gets on the June payroll, and that's too early.
Exactly. So here again is an outline of how it's calculated, and Clyde, I think, mentioned last time that it needs to be prorated. It's important to do it before your first July payroll date. Oh, anytime we're passing, it seems like everything's costing more these days. The ADP rates are being increased effective July 1. And again, I believe that's been communicated directly, but just flagging that for folks. Another key item that there's normally a minimum salary schedule and budget tools for treasurers and so on. Those are going to be available in late September after the General Council executive meeting. We're continuing to monitor inflation rates, which seem to be subsiding, and we'll have more information on that as soon as it becomes available. Here's some more things from Angelica, the Employment Standards Act, and I think there's one in every province. These are Ontario-specific requirements, and just to note that the COVID-related activities, the paid infectious disease emergency leave is no longer in place or wound up or ended. Ontario has a couple of other policies that, well, I'm going to refrain from political comment, but if you have more than 25 employees, there's an electronic monitoring policy where you need to say if you have such a thing, which we generally don't. And my favorite is the disconnecting from work policy, which is you have to have one, but they don't care what it says. That's all I'm going to say about that. Another reminder, and this is again something that bites us every year, is this whole notion of there's only two types of work people who are paid for services provided by an entity, in this case by a charity. You're either a part-time or full-time employee, or you're an independent contractor. And a lot of folks get that confused. So this is a chart that we've made available for years and years and years. And this group, again, the folks that are on this call undoubtedly know all this, but just a reminder for any new folks. Generally speaking, unless someone has multiple clients and invoices you, and maybe including HST, folks are going to be considered part-time employees. It's always good to err on the side of safety on this, but if you're the change agent, if you're the treasurer, and it's been the way it is a long time, again, you need to involve your whole board. You don't want to be showing up as an individual, even if you're right. The way things often work in church decision making is you need to bring a few others along with you. So just to recap, the ADP fee, the cost of living groups, and the pastoral charge payroll form is available on the website. A couple of things. This one's going to apply. I guess even this is what I have to pay attention to. We bumped into a fair bit of this where folks just assume that CPP continues or might stop. If someone's still on the payroll, and there is a need for employees between 65 and 70 to instruct the employer what to do. So again, I'm not going to go through this in detail other than to say it's available on the slides, and you need to do this because otherwise you're going to end up with payroll variances and the pay. I think they're called peer reports, if I'm not mistaken. And you end up having to explain all this stuff away. But there are forms available to do this, and anyone who's in this boat should know what's required there. I think depending on your work history, it makes sense to keep paying in because you get lifetime credit for your contributions when they calculate your benefit. Clergy residence deduction. Again, I always have a flurry of this in late April from ministers and otherwise, but the key point here is for ministers who want to have their tax reduced at source, they do have to request it of the CRA. It's not a matter of requesting it of the church treasurer. The church treasurer can only put that into play if and when an employee shows up with a CRA authorization. So the form to do that is at T1213. Ministers should know this, but sometimes if you have a new treasurer or a minister in a new location, they'll say, well, at my old place, they did it this way. That might be fine. If so, great. But unfortunately, as a payroll administrator, you have a duty to follow the CRA guidelines. And there, of course, is Angelica's team and the ADP number. And I guess one other thing I'll mention, if there's any chance that anyone out there hasn't authorized Angelica's team to be able to look at their stuff in order to troubleshoot, I can't understand why you wouldn't do that. She's got some really top-notch people there, to help out if there is a problem. So with that, Steve, how are we doing for questions?
Hang on, I've got a few questions here. Let me just bring my picture up. So a few questions have come in, and let me remind folks that I am watching the chat, and so by all means, add your questions in there and I will bring them up as we move along this way. So general question, says Susan, before we even began, about income classification. Where do you recognize a donation made for space donated by the church? Is that other income or visitor donation? Do you give a tax receipt for the monetary equivalent? What do we do with that?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. Do you, Clyde?
I think I understand the question is that somebody has taken use of space within the church and they're now making a donation because of it. And the CRA's recognition of that is rent. Anybody pays for something like that to be used where they're getting the benefit of using a church asset, it's rent.
It's rent, yeah.
And
It's
there's
not a donation.
no donation receipt.
However, there are, and again, I'm not arguing with Clyde, that's always been a losing battle for me, but there are lots of folks who accept donation instead of rent. And the key is it can only be a donation if you didn't have to pay it. In other words, if you have a suggested donation, I can choose not to pay it. There are lots of folks who don't ask for rent and ask for donations instead, and you want to be very careful with that. It has to be invitational and not mandatory. And as Clyde has noted, the CRA interpretation is pretty clear. If you're getting something for that money, then you technically don't get a tax receipt.
Good. Couple of questions around payroll. The first is from Nancy, and I'm not sure I understand it either. She says, how do we retrieve the payroll schedule for 2023, 2024 from ADP? It doesn't come from ADP, does it? Anyway, she says the Service Connect feature for TeamPay users isn't available yet. She's emailed to canadasbs@adp.com 2 weeks ago, got nothing back, and she's frustrated.
Aha, Clyde.
The schedule for payroll for next year, starting, I think it's June 1st, but I'm not 100% sure of that. But for the next year is already out and it is available online where you process your payroll because they tell you the dates that you have to do it. If you're having problems, this is one of the things that you could go to Angelica's team and they would be able to help out if they're already authorized on your payroll.
Okay. That's an important commercial.
The email also that you noted is incorrect. It's not done. It's not at Canada SB. So the new email address is on our slides for you to use as well for ADP. But I'm more than welcome to send it to my team and we can take care of it.
So is that the slide there? ucc.pastoralcharge.support@adp.com.
Yes.
So Nancy, maybe you were sending your request to the wrong email address. Maybe that's why you haven't had a response. Thank you. Sandy says our cost of living area has been reclassified and the wages are being reduced, but that we don't lower the minister's wage, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty standard best practice in payroll administration. If if a rule changes or a structure changes, it typically will apply to new people as opposed to incumbents.
Aren't you fortunate that the cost of living is going down in your neighborhood? It's not in mine. A CRA issue. Our minister is leaving at the end of June, says Susan, and it is her name that Canada Revenue has as their primary contact. How do we get that changed?
Well, if her name, if by her name, you mean that you have a My Business account, for example, then she should just add some people. Clyde can jump in here too, but if you have an active account, you can change it online. That's, again, one of the powers of this. it is frankly or has been a paper nightmare to try to change it by paper. But if once you're online, it's great. But you need to have that authorized person initiate the action, whether it's online or submitting some paperwork. How'd I do on that one, Clyde?
You did very well on that, and it takes very little time. The last one I added in, they went online, they added my name to it, and within 24 hours, I had access.
And you can have several people on the account. So it's not that it's not that you can only have one.
Yeah, I
You
also
could add in
recommend
three
that we
more
have
people, and
three.
then one of them could take her off when she leaves.
That's right.
Good, thank you. Question about faithful footprints. Cheryl wants to know, where do we get this green audit?
Well, I think the web link was there, but if you even if you Google Faithful Footprints, it'll pop right up. There's an online contact form that you can complete, and again, you'll get access to good advice. And let me say, when I like say good advice, it doesn't mean yes all the time. Like one of the things I really appreciate is having a caring professional who's trying to help. Sometimes just say no because it doesn't work. But there's a contact form available there, and their turnaround time is very good.
Oh, I should say in our church, we had about 4 different projects, and he said, do these 3 and not that one. There's not enough payback on the last one. It's not worth it. He was really, really helpful. And he gave us oodles of time. We were very, very happy with that. Dawn wants to know, how many people can sign up at Church Hub, and who absolutely must be accessing Church Hub?
Well, we've identified 2 roles, and I think there might be a third. Certainly the treasurer is a role that we've established that like every treasurer should have access to Church Hub, because that's how we're going to bill you assessment. That's where you get all kinds of information. We've also created something called Church Admin, which is the lead administrative contact. So that that can be the treasurer, but it might be a different person as well. Those are the 2 that administratively should be registered. We have special use. For example, if you're going to have a search committee, we have that in place with separate security and time limited and all that kind of thing. Ministers are on there as well for updating their information. But if you're talking about church administration, there's at least 2 key roles.
Mm-hmm. But ministers are there as ministers. They're not.
That's right.
If ministers are checking in on behalf of the pastoral charge, they need to use a different account. The 2 accounts are not linked.
There's the security is entirely different. A minister could have, in some smaller places, a minister might be the lead admin contact, although we try to discourage that.
And the advantage of Church Hub too is you should be using, if the treasurer goes on, use a personal email address, because otherwise you get emails going to that address you've used, and you may not see them.
Oh, yeah. Somebody else was privately messaging me about that too. It's really important that treasurers provide an email address that is live and checked regularly by the treasurer, because we send stuff out to you.
That is how we communicate. So anytime there's going to be a broadcast, which for me, there's probably 3 or 4 a year, we pull the Church Hub most current information, same day Church Hub information. So we rely on it. We need you to be there.
Sounds good. I've got a couple of insurance questions have come up, but you haven't talked about insurance yet. Do you want me to?
Well, yeah, let's if you can remember them, Steve, let's save them, and I'll just provide a few updates which may or may not address them in advance.
I've got them written down here in a file, so we won't lose them. One
Great.
Last question about cost of living. Somebody says, I live in Whitehorse. Our cost of living group was decreased by 1 level, but that seems really strange because it's expensive to live here, basically. Seems very low. Can we register or protest somewhere? Because this seems lower than it should be.
Well, they could certainly ask. I think there's some provision right on the webpage. I don't have a name that comes to mind, but the idea of what is in the basket of goods that is used to calculate, it's become a little more sophisticated than the market value thing that we were using before. So there might be different elements to it, but if you need more information, send in a note. Angelica might offer herself up as a contact there. Her information is going to be on the on the slides at the end. And Alan Hall would have a better answer too.
It occurs to me too, the minimum salary is simply the minimum. I mean, if a pastoral charge feels that that's not a livable wage for their area, they're entitled to pay more than minimum.
Absolutely. And to be honest, as an urban volunteer in my own church, when I first saw those charts, it never occurred to me that that's what people actually were paid. So, yeah. Okay. Anything
Okay,
else?
I'm done then, Eric. So
Okay.
I'll save the insurance questions for the next round.
Okay, well, coincidentally, that's a nice little lead in. Here's some insurance stuff. So just a reminder, again, everyone here should know that the most efficient way we could think of to make sure that all congregations have directors and officers liability coverage is to buy what we call an umbrella policy. So every congregation now, not camps and incorporated bodies have a different structure, but congregations are covered under an umbrella plan, and the certificate, if you need it or want to read it or anything, plus additional information, is available online. So this is really important. I have usually in any year, I have one or two cases where individual church volunteers are suddenly being sued or chased by the CRA because of maybe they were nominated by their congregation to help another agency or sit on a board and those kinds of things. You should always make sure in this day and age, unfortunately, litigious times, if you're going to be on a board, make sure it has DNO and your church board and all the broad-based committee members and so on, all are included within that. Third-party insurance. Again, I was pretty pumped about the new arrangement, and I guess this is one that we still haven't formally announced, ironically, but you get the news here. We should be requiring of all our regular tenants that they have their own insurance, and we've got a program here especially for time-limited events and so on, a much better offering than we had before. I used the example last time. First of all, it's 24/7. It's online. The certificate gets issued right away. It's all very automated, very cool. And the example of a 3-hour birthday party, $12.83 this is for adults. And if you have a special occasion permit and alcohol at this event, $37.88, and still, in my view, pretty manageable. Now, one thing we did find, and some folks out in BC flagged this for us, was that this program really delivers benefit because it looks at how long is your event. So, if you have a day-long event versus a 1-hour event, it literally gets that granular. It turned out that the rates weren't so great for a full year, sort of like say a rental every single week of the year, that kind of stuff. And we went back with that information. And again, this is the power of being able to do this for a larger group. And so the rates for annual rentals have been reduced dramatically. Like we're talking about 70 or 80%. So they're now competitive with anything else we see out there. However, briefly, someone helped flag a glitch in our pricing, and the broker fixed it immediately. So good news on the third-party progress for sure. Some information on cybersecurity. We're continuing to see what we can do. The national office has gotten a very strong rating from an underwriting perspective with what it's tried to do around security and all. We run tests. We send people fake emails. We do all kinds of things to do education. But we struggle to come up with a program for all congregations because the practices are so uneven. So here's a list of things that an insurer would look for you to have in order for you to qualify for local insurance. So we're offline backups, obviously antivirus, and increasingly folks are looking for multi-factor authentication like you have to do with your bank or almost anything these days. So we can't get that on a group basis because we have, I saw one fellow on this call, Andy's way more sophisticated than most companies, Andy at Bloor Street, and he could probably get an insurance policy, no problem at all, but most of us couldn't. So we're looking at the possibility of buying instead access to the troubleshooting and problem solving when you have a problem. It's not insurance, but it's sort of like a hotline if you do get into a problem. You may hear more about that later, depending on what my various approval bodies decide. Okay, getting back to the property insurance now. We're more flexible than your average insurance company, but we can't be so flexible as to put ourselves out of business here. So we started this in December on a very rushed basis, and we're at the stage now where we're chasing down folks who haven't acted. And in my experience, most people who haven't acted, it's because we haven't reached the right person, or we sent the email to the wrong person, or a dated reference. And if you had a local broker, the local broker knew who to contact, but we never did. So we've had some learning curve stuff there. In any case, we've delivered the savings in December. We're delivering the savings in March and June, and we're on track to deliver that $1 million plus savings to congregations. One of the refinements was that we're moving to an annual cycle of a December 1 renewal, which facilitates reinsurance negotiations and all of that. So if you apply to the program now, whether you're a new entrant or whether you're a June renewal, your end date, you'll get what's called a short-term policy. And again, not to oversell, there will be an increase in December. There's no, just the way the market is, but we still expect that you'll have sustained year-over-year savings. And of course, we all need claims to behave as well. So new entrants can be applied. Just a couple of bits of information. Early on, we were insisting on appraisals. No longer the case. If you have one, good. And again, you'll get a short-term policy. I saw a couple of cases today. If you have original wiring, you'd be wise to stay with your current insurer. Our reinsurers don't want to see that, or basically aren't letting us underwrite that. If you have a current insurer and you have that kind of thing, stay with them. Another refinement, you'll be hearing more. We're at the final stages of some negotiation with getting either a national appraisal deal, and also we've got an arrangement with a small practitioner who's very good. If you want an appraisal at a lower cost and you don't need it in the next 2 weeks or something, we have an arrangement where we can, someone's traveling back and forth between Alberta and Ontario and can sort of do them while they're traveling back and forth, as informal as that sounds. So the service, as we will launch this, has not been, we've been just totally swamped with, frankly, trying to reach the right people. We've had people who lots of people who, clicked 3 buttons and renewed, and it was all beautiful. I think Clyde just described that earlier. But we've had lots of people who've struggled with the online enrollment process and uploading a form. So once we get everybody, with their payment information available, installed, the renewal process going forward should be much simpler. We've also done things like if you've requested a change, I've said set those aside for a while. Like we focus on getting everybody insured first, and we're doing triage, frankly, and we'll keep working to get that better. However, in the fall, we'll be back to providing a certificate in advance, 30 to 45 days in advance of renewal. And we won't have to redo all the things we've been doing the last couple of years. So we're reaching the end, folks, and I'm ready for those insurance questions. But here's a number of the regular contact information for assessments, for church loan payments, stewardship, the self-insurance program. Those are all there, and that's what I've got. So I'm going to stop and turn it over to Stephen.
Okay, thank you. So I do have a bunch of insurance questions, and let me just throw them at you. Cheryl says, in my current church, they applied for a new church insurance plan last December, January. They aren't currently insured by the UCC plan. They'll need to move from their current agent. When are they going to hear?
We weren't even accepting applications at the beginning, and should have told people. We tried to tell people a variety of different ways. So if there was a renewal at a December timeframe, basically they could either seek a quote now or wait until the fall and request a quote then for December to December.
Okay, thank you. Helen writes, our insurance is with a different company. We'd like to switch to the UCC Protect. I'm in the process of filling out the right form. How long is it going to take? Our existing policy renews July 19th. If it's not processed by then, does that mean we lose the chance and have to take a full year renewal from the old company, or can you switch midterm?
Right. So here's the again, full disclosure and a bit of the challenge in year one. So there's certainly time to get that application in. And if you do so, I can make sure that you get a response and a quote. The closer we get to December, though, I don't want anyone thinking bait and switch or different. We are looking to deliver savings from most insurers, but we're also going to be passing on an increase in December. The magnitude still to be known. So as long as you have your eyes open to say, hey, that July 19th date, you're going to go till December 1, and then you'll be in the program with an automated renewal, but there will be an increase. So I'm wanting to be very careful about customer expectations here. So hopefully I made that clear. Yes, you can submit an application. We'll get you a quote. And, if the quotes say 10% lower, most of that, some of that could get undone in December, but you'd also be looking at probably a significant increase from your existing insurer.
Well, you were saying before we started, the insurance market is just skyrocketing.
Yeah, it hasn't slowed down. And one of the issues too is building cost inflation. Now, I happen to think insurance companies are being a bit opportunistic about that, but
people are saying the same thing about grocery stores, Eric, but the grocery stores deny it.
So does our insurer. Okay.
Florence says, we're paying for UCC Protect, but we haven't received the policy. We're worried. We can't find our original email. What we've updated twice, but what should we do?
Well, now I'm going to speak in general terms here, but if the monthly deduction is coming out of your bank account, don't worry. B, I was on a call just today on the status of getting policy certificates out. And again, this first year, we deliberately said we'd rush the program and certificates, because there's no change in the policy wording or the deductibles and all that kind of stuff. We've asked people to bear with us around getting a policy, but you should be receiving it, if you haven't already, within the next week or two. And in the meantime, don't worry. If you're paying, there's no argument.
And Liz says, we got an email that we were going to be included and we should update our banking info. And the notice said that it was effective April, but we'd already paid for our current policy for April and May. So we wrote back and asked for clarification and got the response that your call is important to us.
I
Not
got
sure.
the same email and it said April, but everything else and all the forms with it were dated June 1st. So there was an error in the email coverage where it said April.
This is why we have these webinars.
Yeah, and folks, I've got to tell you, I didn't know that. And Clyde, if you can send me your sample, that would be good.
I will see what I can do.
So Jeff is wondering when we can see details of the coverage provided.
Well, two things: the full policy wording is, I think, even now available online, but should be, if it isn't, I'll double check for that. If you're talking about your own individual certificate with your deductible and your amounts and so on, that, if you're a December renewal, you should have in hand, depending on, like, if you renewed on a timely basis. March, you should have your policy, as I said, within the next week or two. They're just catching up right now, and June will be faster still.
Laura says, do we have to tell our local broker that we've now cut them out and we're dealing with Hub directly? We've just received a payment email for the June renewal from the local broker.
Yeah, certainly there has been communication by Hub to the local broker. I'm not sure what they would have forwarded against what the local broker would have forwarded. Technically, the local broker would need to take you to another company if they wanted to keep the business.
A couple of questions about appraisals. Arlene says, I thought we didn't need an appraisal. And Fred says, how do we make a request for the UCC appraiser? So when is it necessary and how do you get one?
Well, first of all, appraisals is a huge debate right now, but if you want to have replacement cost insurance, the industry wording is you need one every 5 years. And then you get in. Now, virtually no one does that. So next is who pays for it. And there are companies that try to do their own appraisals and not charge the customer. And I'm looking at trying to do that once we build up the financial strength of the captive insurance arrangement. But if you want to maintain full replacement value coverage, you should expect whoever you're with, doesn't matter, you'll be hearing from your insurance company saying we want to update the values and asking you to get an appraisal. Now, as for getting an appraiser, depending on what part of the country you're in, we are in final negotiations trying to get a national sort of price with regional adjustments, but basically an affinity arrangement with one of the major firms. We're just waiting sign off again from our reinsurance company. And the reinsurance company has already signed off on this, a fellow out of Edmonton who does work all over the country at a discounted rate. And if you're looking to have an appraisal anyway, which as a trustee, you should do periodically, I can provide that information to you as well.
So just write to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Earthquake insurance from somebody in Victoria.
Okay, there are our main reinsurer, which is Intact, which is the biggest company in Canada, will not offer earthquake insurance in a couple of selected districts in BC. I can't say for sure if Victoria is one, but they might be. And we certainly disclosed that right at the beginning, as that was one of the changes, that this program would not offer earthquake insurance where the reinsurer basically wouldn't want to take on additional risk. Some people care, some people don't, because the deductible for earthquake insurance is at usually 10% or even more, but at least 10% of the building value. So if there was a total loss and you have a building worth $3 million, that would be a $300,000 deductible that you need to start with. Quite a number of churches in BC have asked not to have earthquake insurance because they didn't want to pay for it. But the plan, just so we're clear, the captive insurance arrangement that is insured by Intact, Wawanesa, and Northbridge, for certain specific areas in the lower mainland of BC, we don't offer that, and we tried to make very clear that anyone considering it understands that.
So would the appraisal stay waived, or would we have to pay for one later?
Oh, no, appraisals, again, this totally independent of the United Church arrangement. The existing participants have not been asked, some have been asked to provide appraisals to maintain market value. But I think you'll see that in the next 5 years, every insurance company will be wanting an appraisal from whoever, from their quote unquote commercial or charity clients.
Okay, thanks.
So again, if we have a couple of good, strong years with with limited or normal claims experience, it may be that this could be one of these things that I'm able to offer on an umbrella basis. In other words, either discounted or free.
Be careful of your candles, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the normal lead time to submit an insurance application and get a quote? Our renewal date is June 1, which is probably too short a time frame for this year, but do we have to wait another whole year? What's the normal time frame?
There's two things to consider there, and this I would say to everybody. First of all, you should know if there is, and how big they are. There always is a midterm cancellation fee. So my advice to that individual would be, there's no chance of getting a proper quote for June, and oh, by the way, we've got the December renewal anyway. My advice would be to seek a quote in early 2024. And if you don't have much of a cancellation penalty by then, you'll know what the rate increase was, and you'll be comparing apples to apples, and you could buy a policy in January that takes you to next December. But that would be the course I would recommend from what I heard.
Good. Last question on my list. Robert says, I submitted a request for a quote 3 months ago and haven't heard anything. Should I wait or poke someone?
Well, if you've waited that long, you're way more patient than I am. Send me an email and I will get you an answer in the next day or two. In terms of it should be on a list somewhere. And frankly, it's either fallen through the cracks or an email response has gotten lost, and either way you're not happy. So you've been very patient.
Another good reason to have these webinars. That's those are the questions I've seen on my list, friends. So if you've got another question, write it into the chat right now. We can probably take another couple of minutes of that, but I don't have anything else currently.
Okay, and I'm just so I don't normally browse the chat, but today I am. Look at that. Somebody had a 4-hour bridal shower for $17.04.
That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
Excellent. And also, some of this is good education for me too. I'm seeing a comment that it's a $1,500 deductible instead of the normal $1,000. Again, for the types of actual things that can happen, you're really worried about being sued for way more than that. So hopefully that deductible isn't a big deal.
Don is pointing out that in some churches, it's the trustees that handle insurance and they don't necessarily come to the webinars. I'm wondering whether we need a different name for these webinars. And I'm almost wondering if we should have a contest for that. Because in different churches, it's not the treasurer, it's somebody else who does payroll or insurance or rentals. And all of these things are connected and overlapping, and there's probably information here for people who are involved in each one of those areas. So encourage your colleagues on your official boards or your consuls to come and be part of these webinars. And if you've got a better name for these webinars, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and we may have folks who don't want to do this every month, as keen as some of you are. So I think we are going to look at having potentially larger broadcast type events, marketed, much further in advance type thing. Like if we were saying, after Thanksgiving in October, we're going to have a special session for all things trustees or something. We are talking about how to best help here and still be able to do it in a cost-effective way at scale.
Yeah. One of the things we heard loud and clear in the surveys that you filled out for me in January and March is the need for some focused onboarding programming. So we were actually in a meeting, several of us earlier this afternoon, talking about how to start planning those out, and you should see some of that coming probably as early as Q4 in 2023, and some payroll stuff, probably onboarding payroll administrators probably in Q1 or Q2 2024 is the current plan. So cross your fingers and hope we don't run into hiccups, but your feedback has helped to shape where we're moving, and that's important.
Yeah, and even in the product design stuff, this is one of the things, again, about having your own, being able to influence it more. Literally 1 or 2 emails from BC, and program changes were made within a week.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank everybody. We're going to have a summer break of sorts, but I can't say this often enough. I say this as someone who was a treasurer for a whole bunch of years, and thank you for being one. You don't always get thanked, and you do sometimes have to be the messenger. So just constant reminder: A, thank you, but B, you're just the messenger. It's not your deficit. It's not it's not your property challenge. You're the messenger, and thank you for your faithful work.
So I think what you're saying, Eric, is that we're finished for tonight. Is that right? You don't have any more slides hidden in the background there?
I've been signaling for a beer, but no one's listening.
Well, we've got to do something about that. So as Eric was hinting, we are not going to meet at the end of June. We've decided that even if God isn't on holiday, we want to be. And so we will resume again in the fall. We are actively looking at ways to make some adjustment to how we do the programming here. You've heard us talking around the edges of that, and a lot of that isn't entirely nailed down yet. But one of the things that is important to us is to be able to continue the opportunities to gather you folks together, because you learn so much from each other. It's fun to read the chat and realize that only half of it are questions that I have to raise to the experts here, because otherwise you're helping each other, and that's a really powerful community that you have built by listening to Eric and Clyde and Angelica. So blessings to each of you for a wonderful summer break. We'll look forward to reconnecting with you in September. Bye for now. Okay, and I'm just going to pull the leaders into a small breakout group here so that we can debrief for one last time this spring. And we'll look forward to seeing the rest of you sometime in the fall. There we go.